tonight, which if anybody gets interested in the topic in more detail, this is going to be the library's copy. So I started collecting postcards in 1985, and I just have been in love with them, and I've collected widely different topics. And when we bought our house here in Orwell in 1983, I began looking for postcards in Orwell, but I'm not as probably an advanced collector as Sandy, or don't have as many cards as in the historical rooms upstairs. But anyway, today I'm going to talk about postcards, using postcards from Vermont as illustrations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about postcard mania, what are postcards, types of cards, postal history, the photographers, and then I'll show various postcards from Orwell, Shoreham, and around the state. So from the period of about 1905 to about 1935, it was a period of postcard mania. People were crazy for postcards. They were sold in all different places. There were postcard clubs. People collected postcards, and of course they sent them through the mail. But postcards were also not just used to send messages. People send them in envelopes to show what their town looked to relatives and what have you. And here's two postcard stands. So what is a postcard? Well, they're approximately this size. They're privately published. They call postal cards are the government cards that are produced. And at different times, the postcards could be sent at a lower rate, which encouraged their use, lower than an envelope. Although after a while, people would put 5 or 6 postcards in an envelope and send them to a friend, showing them where they had been. And most of them, at least the ones after 1900, had to have postcard written on them. So there are two major types of postcards: printed cards, and they are mainly taken by companies who would send photographers around. They take pictures, they bring the negatives back, and then they make plates where they would print the cards on printing presses. And because of the technology, they'd have to do a couple of hundred in order to make it makes sense to make the plate. So the printed cards, typically, there are many copies of them. The photo card, on the other hand, and there are black and white printed cards and there are colored printed cards. A lot of the early printed cards were printed in Germany, and they would send the negatives over, and then they would decide what colors they were. So it's not the original color, it's just the German printers deciding what the color should be. The photo postcard, on the other hand, are mostly produced by local photographers, and they often were in very small runs, and they would be sold in local stores, and the photographer themselves would sell them. And many of the photographers would go and take a picture of your house with you in front of it. You could send it to your relatives, and immigrants would typically send cards back home showing how well they were doing in the New World. Graphic artist cards, that's another type of postcard, and we won't deal with those, but as you can see, they're artist renderings, and they're printed on printing presses. So as I said, the printed cards are printed by companies, large runs, and mainly population centers would have the printed cards because that's where you could sell a lot of them. So cities tend to have printed cards, and you seldom find any real photo cards. So here's real photo postcards. The real photo postcards tend to capture the towns and the villages and the everyday lives of the people. And this guy is a conductor at a Rutland. And not only do these cards, the real photo cards, have scenery and what have you, people could also go into photo studios and have their pictures taken on postcard stock. And postcards were so popular that the stock was so cheap to use that most photographers moved into using postcard stock to print the pictures of families and what have you. And the postal service workers, they would have pictures of themselves and they'd hand them out at Christmas time, hoping for a tip. And I do have some cards where it's very clear that that's what they're doing. How can you tell a printed card from a photo postcard? Well, if you take a magnifying glass and put it up to a printed card, it's made up of little dots. And the finer the dots, the higher quality of the printing. But if you look at a real photo card and you put a magnifying glass on it, there are no dots. It's a continuous picture. You can also tell whether it's a real photo or a printed card by the backs. And there are standard manufacturers of the postcard stock. Here, Azo, and you can tell by looking at the back. So printed cards started earlier in the 1870s. These are being commercially produced to sell to people privately. And because it cost as much to send a postcard as it did to send a regular envelope, they weren't all that popular. And early private mailing card was the substitute word for postcard. And then after the turn of the century, it moved into having to be marked postcard. The first postcard stock was produced around the turn of the century, but 1907 is very crucial because they allowed divided backs. Prior to 1907, you had to have the address on this side. You couldn't put a message. You weren't allowed to put a message. So early cards, they might have a white border along the bottom and people would write a small message. But after the divided back, then you could have correspondence on it, and then it became very, very popular. And then in the 20s, the popularity began to decline, although you can find real good cards up in through the 30s. And they moved into what they call linens, which was a particular form of printing, and then the chromes, which you buy today when you go to a souvenir store. So I'm really talking about kind of pre-1935. How about the photographers? Well, you could be an amateur photographer. You could take a roll of film and send it to Kodak, and they would print it on postcard stock. So a lot of amateurs did photo postcards, and some of them are the most interesting. Down below here is a Vermonter lining up his family to take a picture, and this is a postcard. And here we have this I think his name is Richardson. He was out of Rutland, and he's set up with his tripod. There were itinerants who went from town to town. There was a group that had a goat and go into town, and you can take a picture of your kid in the goat cart, and they'd run it off, and you could get pictures of your children in the goat cart. Here's one at a circus, traveling circus, and here's a Harley guy. But most important for us is Herman Cassens was a photographer with the Eastern Illustrating Publishing Company. And I would say most of the cards of Orwell are taken by Cassin's brother, he sent photographers around New England and printed his cards on this is a postcard back, and you could recognize his cards. And there he is with his brother in I think it's a Model T. So many of the cards that you see on display are taken by Easton Illustrating and Mr. Cassins. So the printed cards tended to be scenery, general pictures that could be sold to anyone. The real photo postcards was much more variety, much more intimate, what's going on in the town, parades, homecoming, all kinds of baseball teams. So here's some examples of the different subjects of postcards, all from Vermont. This one down here happens to be a printed card, terrific card of Larrabee Point Ferry, and here we have the school and some couple. So the times that postcards are really popular are 1907 to about 1935, and it's a period of great change. And we are going from the horse and buggy to the car, and many important technology changes, but really what's important in terms of the history of photography is that the photographers are beginning to lose their trade, because the technology allows amateurs to take pictures. So rather than having to go to the photo studio or call the professional photographer, they are taking pictures themselves, which undermines the business. So they tend, the photographers, to start printing on postcard stock. But one of the ways they can stay a photographer is taking photo postcards, putting them in the general store, being on call to do photo postcards of the family farm or what have you. So this is really important because almost the change in the technology drove the photographers to produce these photo postcards. And I would say that this period is the most documented period in the history of the country, because all these photographers were out trying to remain photographers. But they all added a store to their business. They'd sell amateur cameras, they do the developing, so they turned into shops and photographers at this time. So I won't go through all of this, but you can see what was happening. We go from Teddy Roosevelt to FDR. These are the periods that are covered. We have all these movements, unions, child labor, and of course we have World War. We have the Spanish-American War. We have the Mexican Border War. We have World War I. And these are just all the events that are happening during this period. And postcards are the only form that begs you to write something commenting about the picture. Unfortunately, most of the cards, they don't comment about the picture that says, wish you were here or what have you. But here's some messages, all from, this is Benson, I think these two are Orwell. Arrived home, all okay, about ate supper in Rutland. It gives the kind of details, and the mails are actually quite reliable and quite quick. So someone could send a postcard saying, I'm on the train, I'll be in Rutland, and you could do it the day before to get there on time, and people would know to meet the train. So here we are in Orwell. This picture actually, I cropped a card, took out some of the sky and some of the foreground, but because the Eagle Inn was such a tourist draw, there are lots of pictures of the Eagle Inn, and probably those are the customers that bought the printed cards and sent them home. Anybody recognize anything?
Sure.
So there's the bank, and there's the, what was the IGA, and the bank again with the IGA. So these are all Easton illustrating, and you can see inside the Catholic Church. And there's Buxton's before it was Buxton's. And here are the ferries. Now, I don't know, this wasn't Thai, was it? Anybody remember this? This is Chittenden Point, I think. Yeah. And yeah.
Where did the Chittenden Point ferry go?
It went to New York.
Where exactly?
I don't know.
Just before you get to Mount Independence, the road you go down towards the, I can't think of the name of it, but that's where that little ferry was.
And just a small dirt road?
Yeah, there's a big stone building there, and it was an inn. Like when I was a high school kid in the '60s, I'd hang out down there with the youngsters working at the place.
Oh, yeah?
But that was a little, really rinky-dink period.
Huh.
They used to call it the 3-minute ferry.
The 3-minute ferry?
3-minute ferry? 3 minutes. And at bottom, when you go up on the New York side, you have to go over the railroad tracks. You all had to bail out of the car to get up the hill.
So here's some more Orwell. I think probably the Eagle Inn is the most photographed building. There didn't seem to be a local photographer, commercial photographer in Orwell or the area. So I understand there are some amateur photographers, and there are stocks of negatives someplace during this period, but there wasn't a local photographer that I've been able to identify.
Where was the Eagle Inn?
Right up when you come up the hill,
Where the town clerk's
where
office.
the town clerk's office is.
If you walk there, you can see the steps, the walkway up to the steps.
Really?
So this is a modern kind of chrome card. This is probably, everybody recognizes this. Now, I don't have very many cards of Shoreham. As you can see, it's the inn, and then the shop next to the inn, and an overshot of the village. Does the Shoreham Historical Society have a collection of postcards?
I don't know if it's a postcard collection per se.
Yeah.
Some of them are too many.
You can get them on eBay, and they're relatively inexpensive on eBay. You search postcard Shoreham in Vermont, and you should be able to find them. Now I'm going to take you through some of the different subjects of photo postcards in Vermont, and they're not necessarily of Orwell or Shoreham, but here's Middlebury, the main street in Middlebury, and here is the main street in Bethel. Now some of these local photographers were really good, and the images are just terrific, not only documenting what it was like then, but also the composition is really terrific and clear and well taken. Quite a few cards of sugaring. And I think they probably made these in part to sell to tourists, but they're quite nice, the documenting early sugaring in Vermont. Fairs and celebrations are a common topic of the commercial photographer. And here we have Bellow Falls Fair, and this one is interesting. In that banner over there is Lady Wrestlers. So you can go into the tent and
Everybody look at the crowd.
it was the big draw at the time. And then, of course, farming. But many of these are taken to sell to outsiders or to send locals, sending them to friends and relatives in other places. But they're just absolutely tremendous pictures of farm families. They probably hired the local photographer to come in and take a family portrait and then share it. Sometimes there are Christmas messages on them or what have you. This is a Aunt Whitney's quilling party. This is inside a Vermont church.
Does that say Aunt Dinah?
Oh, you're right, Aunt Dinah. You know Aunt Dinah?
There's a song called Aunt Dinah's Quilting Party.
Really?
Do you see there's quotes around there?
Yeah? Oh.
There's an old song called Aunt Dinah's Quilting
Isn't
Party.
that
I don't
something?
remember the words.
That's something. Well, I do know what church this was. I can't recall it right now, but you see this great documentation of the crafts. Schools, almost every class has their picture taken by a commercial local photographer. And of course, if you had 20 kids in the class, and you probably sold 15 pictures, so that was a good thing for the photographer. Very well documented are when people visit or come home who are famous. So Calvin Coolidge, there are probably 100 cards of Calvin Coolidge and his family. And a very typical one would be him doing farm chores to show that he was a person of the soil, not one of those Washingtonians. So here he is out milking the cow. Him with a sigh and
Where's the bucket?
I think it's a photo op.
probably didn't have time.
We may have seen through this.
All these city folks wouldn't know that anyway.
That's true. And then Teddy Roosevelt coming through Morrisville. And these, I particularly love these because there's the Big Moose Party, Bull Moose Party. And here's an interesting one where the photographer is here taking him, and then there is an African-American porter in the back. So that's really captures a lot of what was going on. And then old Lindbergh. And here he is in Springfield, and here are about 10 cards of his stop in Springfield. And the Buffalo Soldiers. Anybody know what the Buffalo Soldiers were?
I do.
Good. They were
African American.
African-American troops. Got their name from Indian fighting out west, and the story is that their hair reminded the Indians of buffaloes, so that's how they got the name Buffalo Soldiers. But they fought in Cuba, and they fought in the Philippines, and they were located up in Ethan Allen Fort outside of Burlington. And every summer, they came across upstate New York to have exercises at Pine Camp, which is now Fort Drum. And they would come across, and many of the northern New Yorkers had never seen African American. So it's very well documented, their trip across northern New York from Vermont. And as I said, not only were they out and about with their cameras, but they also had studio portraits. And this half moon is a very typical studio prop. But there were lots of props. There were stuffed animals. There were paintings of castles and all kinds of. And you could go into, at least in cities, there might be 4 or 5 different backdrops that you could choose to be portrayed in front of. You can see there. And on the my right there are 2 Iroquois baseball players. So here's all studio photographs. This is taken at some firemen's convention, and here's the guy with the nozzle of the fire hose, and the backdrop is the fireplace. I don't know whether they caught that when it was taken. And if you notice this guy down here, he, you know the story, after you have a dog for a while, you begin to resemble each other. Well, this guy resembles his deer head, but he either brought that to the studio, or sometimes they would come and hang a backdrop, and then they would take the portrait at the person's house. But this guy, I don't know if any of you have seen, what is it, The Office? Who's that, the star, the comedian? He looks like...
Dick Carell?
Yeah, that's who he is, Dick Carell. Stores and business fronts. So these were very common because they would use that as publicity. They might hand out, the stores would hand out pictures of their facade and as publicity. And this is, of course, the Tuttle Company in Rutland. Remember Tuttle turned into a big book dealer. And anybody guess what that is?
Brandon?
No, it's Fairhaven. It's on the main street of Fairhaven. And it was very, very common for people to document their hunting trophies. And here we have Mr. Robbins, the veteran bear hunter of Vermont. And this is his 101st bear. So you have people documenting their dubious achievements.
What is this meant in the Moxie sign?
Moxie is a kind of a soda, early, soft drink. And then documenting industry. These are the West Rutland and the Marble Works. And I was listening to the hearings for the Supreme Court, and they mentioned that the facade of the building was made out of Vermont marble. And these are the kind, I like the kind of interiors of the workers, documents, child labor, and that kind of. And then institution. Here's the Old Ladies Home in Rutland, Vermont. And here we have the State Hospital, which was at an earlier time called the Insane Asylum. And here is the early shots of the Burlington airport. And then there are all kinds of oddball images. Valuable coon dogs. This guy's advertising his dogs at a Hartford, Vermont. And this is actually a broadside taken in Rutland, Vermont, advertising moving pictures. So, of course, in the 20s, moving pictures are just coming in, and the early facades, the outsides of the movie theaters are well documented by these photo postcards. The end. We have some pictures of the ski areas in Vermont. These are a little later, in the 30s more, but so that's all I have as far as a prepared talk. But if you have any comments, or and I want to say it's so nice to see so many people here. It's really great. Thank you for coming. Well, we're not going to just sit here all day. All right. Anybody have any comments? Yeah.
I have pictures that my grandfather was a chauffeur.
Yeah.
He was a painter, George Innes Jr. He worked for him. And they went out, there was a professional photographer on the trip. They went out, they took different pictures.
In what area?
In Yosemite,
Oh, yeah?
in the Redwood Forest. And they have a picture, I have a picture of the monument in the middle of the United States. And there was some kind of a spring between Las Vegas and someplace in Nevada that he's looking down the hole. They were nice enough to take a lot of pictures of him too. I don't know, that might not have been the whole collection, but we have, he's in all of the pictures that I have. But it's just great. And I have one of my mother too, who was born in 1916.
And are they on photo postcards?
Yes.
Oh, boy. Well, I'd be interested in seeing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were very convenient. You could easily, they had scrapbooks to put them in, but you know, very easy to transport, put them in boxes, and a lot of them are up in attics, and there were people who were collectors who just, you know, had lots and lots of these things. And right now there are postcard clubs, and you can go to a postcard. It's like an antique show, only it's all postcards. And in fact, I was at one this weekend, and there's one next weekend, I think, down in the fall. I can't remember exactly where it is, but there is one in, there's a postcard club, and they have a show either this coming weekend or the weekend after. If anybody's interested, I can give me a call. No, there's one in Bethel, but that's in a couple of months. This one is, anyway.
How many cards have you collected, and how do you keep your cards?
Well, first of all,
he's embarrassed to admit it.
yeah, I'm embarrassed. First of all, I started, and I did it in conjunction with doing research. And one of my fields was disability, so I started collecting disability. And don't think this is on insane asylums, institutions for the blind and the mentally ill and what have you, and the mentally what we call mentally retarded.
Nationwide?
Nationwide, yeah. And then I got interested in upstate New York, so I bought aggressively New York State postcards, upstate New York, and I moved.
How long ago was this that you started?
85. And the long and short of it is I have probably 50,000.
50,000?
But, and then I discovered.
There's a lot of insane asylums.
There's a bunch of duplication.
At one time, I had 1,600 insane asylums. You know, you're reading about hoarders and people who are out of control.
There's nothing crazy about this.
But see, if you're a professor,
Oh, yeah.
you got to cover. You can explain, oh, this is for research. It's not just for hoarding. So anyway, then I started selling them. because after I was finished doing upstate New York photographers, then I started selling them. So I now buy and sell very, I would say, good, real photo postcards to institutions and advanced, you know, Cornell and those kinds of places. So, but I have books and books